Welcome everyone. Tonight we're going to talk about winter and sniffles, sneezes, and sadness. Say that fast 3 times. Um, Integrative approaches to staying healthy in the winter here in Maine. We're going to first talk about the seasonal cold, common cold, and then we'll go into seasonal affective disorder, treatment strategies, what we can do to keep ourselves healthy. We'll start with this number. Anybody have any guesses on what is 500 million?
Or number of people that are affected.
She's good. Number of people affected by a cold in the United States on an annual basis. So number of cases of colds. So, and what about this number? That's how much we spend on not just our cold and flu medicines, but money lost because of days out of work. So $17 billion are lost due to colds and flus each year. So we have a pretty big investment. It's more than just a cold, in my opinion. And if you look at how many colds and flus an adult or child gets, an average adult gets 2.5 colds a year, an average child gets 5 colds a year. So if you do the math, thinking that cold lasts about 7 to 10 days, that means for an adult, somewhere between 18 to 25 days of the year, they're under the weather, and for a child, up to 50 days a year. And I think that's a conservative estimate for my parents who have kids who are particularly in daycare. I give them the average of 7 colds a year, which at 10 days per cold, they're just sick the whole winter. And I pretty much tell them just to expect that. So they aren't fearful. There's no long-term issues for kids. They're going to get these at some point, but it's hard on parents, I think, more than anything. So we most often see colds in the winter. I think we all are that's obvious to us. Cold brings us indoors, there's less air movement, it's kids going back to school. The other part that I didn't know is that the cold viruses thrive more in low humidity. So the dry winter air is a better environment. So that's why we see more viruses sticking around longer. Makes me think for patients who are at risk, are really young, or really old, having a humidifier in their house might be something that's beneficial just as far as decreasing the virus burden there. So integrative approaches to the common cold, we've got all sorts of things. I picked the strategies that have the most evidence behind them for being the most effective because, I mean, there's everything out there. I think there's a recommendation to stand on your head to prevent the common cold. The things I'm going to go through really have the most meat behind them as far as data. So we'll talk about zinc, honey, sinus irrigation or neti pots, probiotics, vitamin C, meditation, andrographis, elderberry, eucalyptus oil, diet, exercise, rest. We'll start with question. What do you think is the most effective treatment for a cough?
For a cough?
Yep, for a cough. So we're going to look more at cough right now. Say it louder.
Honey and lemon.
You're right. So, honey's been studied probably more extensively than most of our other treatments, and it is as effective as dextromethorphan, which is the main ingredient in a lot of our over-the-counter cough medicines, and way fewer potential side effects. So it's 1 to 2 teaspoons is the recommended dose that's been studied, and it can significantly decrease nighttime cough frequency, severity, and improve in sleep in children 2 years of age and older. We can use honey down to 1 year of age. Honey is a big no-no for infants less than a year because of the risk of botulism. But unless you're a diabetic or a newborn, an infant, then honey is a really good route to go. So I almost never see somebody in the office and not recommending honey.
Is that taken straight?
Straight is how it's been studied, but I often will mix it in with a lemon or a ginger tea if I'm real congested, because that kind of helps with the congestion. So zinc is also has some really good data behind it, and this is something that I usually reach for at the onset of symptoms. So you start feeling that scratchy throat, just that little bit of congestion. The sooner you can get the zinc on board, the better. So the studies looked at taking 23 milligram lozenge every 2 hours as soon as you can. So I keep zinc in my car because I rarely am without my car.
What does
And
it do?
good question. I don't know if I know the pathophysiology of zinc as far as how it boosts the immune system.
But that's basically what it does, is it boosts the immune system. It doesn't just treat a particular symptom.
No, this is
Okay.
more decreasing all of the cold and reducing the length of the cold is what is the
Okay.
most significant. So decreases the length of illness by a day and a half in adults. And vitamin C by itself, I'll go into kind of the research on that, but zinc and vitamin C, we have one good study showing that the combination is most effective. So I often say, all right, I don't know about you, but when I get a cold, I'm like, and you just want to take everything that's possible. So I'm not as worried about pill burden when somebody's talking about a cold because it's usually short-lived, but zinc combined with some vitamin C has been shown to be effective.
Are we not lozenge? Is there 23 milligrams of zinc?
In lozenges?
Yeah.
Yep, some of them. This Nature Made isn't a lozenge. This is a actual tablet. It doesn't need to be a lozenge. That's just what this one particular study used.
Does
These
it
have
have
30 milligrams.
neurotoxicity with zinc?
So if you take it for a prolonged period of time, yes. And yes for the nasal zinc. So I don't know if you're familiar with the Zicam nasal sprays. They have one that has zinc in it, and they've shown that there's permanent loss of smell with nasal zinc kind of intermittently. So I'd say just completely steer away from nasal zinc. There aren't really any studies looking at it, so it's really oral zinc that I recommend. Good question. Um, so getting into vitamin C, this is the one that I think all of us, you've seen the emergency, all these, you get a cold, you start reaching for the vitamin C. Unfortunately, there's not a lot of great studies, evidence to show that vitamin C when you get a cold is going to do a lot to prevent or shorten it, help with those symptoms. So I actually, when people come in and they have their big vitamin C bottle, it's one that I'm like, well, it's not going to hurt. And if it's combined with the zinc, yeah, you might get some more gain from it there. But generally speaking, there's not a lot of evidence behind our vitamin C, unless you're a pediatric child with asthma. And I'm going to get to that on the next slide. The doses, if you are going to go to vitamin C, it's huge doses, like 4, 6, 8,000 milligrams a day. Most of the time, what I see is people taking a little 500 milligrams. Okay, the placebo effect is amazing, and I never want to discount that. So,
I have a
um,
question about the honey.
yeah,
Um, I got some coming back from New Brunswick, stopped in the Amish store, and they had raw honey, which to me tasted different than
hmm
just about. So it felt like it was really good.
yeah,
Is there something more in raw honey or honey? It certainly wasn't overly clear,
yeah,
so it felt like it hadn't been processed or something like
yeah.
that. Is there some honey that's better than others or has more stuff in it that's good
It's a
for a
good
cold?
question. Of if we're looking at allergies, then getting a local honey is really important. So people who have environmental allergies, getting a local honey and just using that in their daily diet is helpful. As far as a raw honey versus a processed honey for the cold symptoms, the cough in particular, I don't think we have any study out there looking at one versus the other. To me, just inherently, it kind of makes more sense the less processed something is, just in general, the better it is, but I don't know if there's a real I can
So
sink my
honey is
teeth
really
into it.
for the cough, not for the cold.
Yeah, it's helping with the cough. That's what we've seen.
Suppressant type.
Yeah. We'll
Okay.
talk about others like the nasal congestion, what you can do for that. Um, so as far as ongoing use of vitamin C, this is something that we see it's particularly helpful if you are in the Marines or you're a marathon runner. So if you're having extreme physical stress, then taking vitamin C prophylactically on a daily basis has been shown to decrease the incidence of colds. For those of us who are kind of average in our activity levels, taking that 500 milligrams a day isn't really going to do much from what we've found. Vitamin D, this I get a lot of questions on because winter, I am a big proponent of vitamin D, but as far as helping with decreasing incidence of colds, helping with cold symptoms once they've onset, we actually don't have much good evidence for supplementing vitamin D for this purpose. We'll talk about it again when we get to the seasonal affective disorder part of the lecture, but unless you're an asthmatic child, this is where I was going before, there's significant decreased risk of asthma attacks in children who have asthma who are supplemented with vitamin D. So that's a little bit of a sideline, but I thought it was important to mention. Now we're going to get into more of the botanicals. Has anybody heard of andrographis before? Yeah, it's amazing because it has some really good data behind it, but it's not well known. It's not known like echinacea or vitamin C, but this has probably some of the best data on it for reducing the symptoms and the duration of colds. So it's a plant from Asia that's used in Ayurvedic medicine. It's known to boost the immune system. So the typical dose is 300 milligrams 4 times a day and starting at the time the cold onsets. Sometimes we'll use this prophylactically, so I'm not a big fan of take something all winter just to prevent colds and flus. But if you're traveling or you're under a lot of stress or your husband comes home with cold and you just adding the andrographis on board to kind of boost your immune system, that's where I would recommend it. But andrographis is actually one of first on my line of defense when I'm looking at cold treatments. And then UMCA, has anybody heard of UMCA? So another one that has a lot of good data behind it, but not very well known. I'm not even going to try the Latin because I can't say it. I have tried in the past. I've heard it, but it's from South African geranium plant, and the homeopathic formulation is what's been the most studied. It comes in this Nature's Way Umca cold care, and it's been shown that it will reduce the duration of the cold if you take a milliliter 3 to 4 times a day. So it's also, again, one of the ones that we have the most evidence behind. Elderberry? Has anybody heard of elderberry? Yeah, so this is where I think it's interesting in that elderberry, much better known, not a lot of science behind it. So when you really look for the hardcore studies behind elderberry, eh, there's not much there. What we do have shows, yeah, it might be beneficial. So it's one that we do have it out there. It's a tablespoon of liquid 3 to 4 times a day. And I find people tend to use that more for cough. I don't see as much relief from congestion, but elderberry is also on the list that people often come in with. And then echinacea, everyone's heard of echinacea, right? Echinacea actually has, at this point in time, the least evidence showing that it's super effective. So I know it's kind of these things that we haven't heard of, more evidence, the things that were tried and true. And this has changed. We had some data 5 years ago that was very promising for echinacea, and since then they've come back with some studies that are much larger showing, yeah, maybe not the benefit that we were thinking. And that may happen with andrographis and with UMCA, that, it's the way of medicine. If you get a big enough study, sometimes what you were thinking you were seeing in these little studies doesn't come out to be true.
Is the
But
andrographis being grown and produced in the U.S. now?
I know you can get it easily through Amazon or Vitacost, but I don't know where it's
They just said
actually.
it was an Asian plant.
Yeah,
I was just wondering if we were able to grow it.
I don't know.
I was just curious.
Yeah, it's good. So moving on to symptoms, what we can do to help with, I've talked a lot about the cough with the honey, but what about that sinus congestion? Sometimes that's the most bothersome. You lie down, you feel like, oh, you're just in a vice. Um, Sinus rinses. Has anybody ever done a sinus rinse? Neti pot?
Curious about it though.
Cool. That's what I like to hear. So there's small studies, but there are positive showing significant relief, not only from the congestion in the sinuses, but the sore throats that happen because of the continual drip, and then ultimately the cough that goes on. We do have one study showing that people doing sinus rinses had a decreased use of antibiotics, so I think that's very promising. I'm also impressed because our ENTs, conventional ENTs are routinely recommending sinus rinses through neti pots. And I'm just like, all right, they're the experts in the field. They're out there for people who have nasal polyps, chronic sinusitis, congestion. They're recommending them. So the hardest time I have is trying to get people to go through with a sinus rinse. I see one person, no, not going to do that. So what I like to do is show this video, which I'll pull up here, because it's nothing like seeing somebody do a sinus rinse.
Sydney, what are you going to do right now? I'm going to do my nose. What do you do to your nose? Well, I take a spray and put it up to my nose, and then squeeze the bottle. And what does that do? It has water inside, and it has the water go up inside my nose and then comes down on the other side. To clean what? To clean out the boogies. Of your... Is it just your nose? Mm-hmm. And your sinuses? And my sinuses. Yeah, okay. So let's blow real quick, see if there's anything in there. Okay? Okay, very good. Just give it a little squeeze, and it goes up and out. And your sinuses are pretty clear these days. Last week they were pretty yucky. There's a boogie. Okay, very good. Good. Blow one more. Good girl. Okay, we'll do this side. The other half. And you have to do both sides when you clean the whole dog. Okay, nice and clear. How does that feel, Sydney? Good. Good? You all cleaned out? Mm-hmm. Okay, thanks. Good girl.
So the neti pot, I don't have a picture of one, but it's just gravity fed. So a neti pot looks like a little genie bottle to me, and you just hold it in the upper nostril and it's gravity fed. I personally like the Neil Med bottles better. I think they're just easier to use. Um, this little girl, she has cystic fibrosis, so she does these on a daily basis. But I love this video because I had this one story of a patient I had out in California, this big burly man. He came in all congested, and I was like, all right, I want you to do some sinus rinses. And he looked at me, and I was like, all right, I'm going to show you the 5-year-old. Yeah, it's hard to live that one down. So the important things about sinus rinses, one, you should use distilled water. There are some very rare but cases of people using tap water and getting bad stuff up there. They typically are, you get these packets of salt basically, so it's a very gentle saline solution that you're using. And you don't want to blow your nose forcefully afterwards. If you blow your nose real forcefully, you can force some of that fluid up into the eustachian tube, which is what connects our ear. No real harm done. It just hurts. It feels like an ear infection until that clears out. So, but yeah, I challenge each of you next time you have some congestion.
You say you get this salt packet.
It
Where
comes
do
with it.
Oh, so when you get one of those tubes that the young girl,
Yep.
the
Yep.
girl use, you go to like Walmart or
Walgreens,
wherever,
Walmart, yeah,
and it comes with salt.
comes with it. And then there's a package of just the salt things if you run out of the ones that come with it. So, yeah, and I think there's a way to make the solution yourself, but I tend to say don't be sick that much and just buy them when you need them. Yeah.
Can you do this as you said prophylactically? Can you do this? Should one do this prophylactically?
So if you have a tendency towards sinus congestion and seasonal allergies, then I recommend it. Just doing it just because. I don't know if you're not having any symptoms and aren't prone to those things. I just tend to be more of a less is better. You understand where I'm going? Excellent. So sinus rinse is one of my favorite recommendations, especially because of everybody's faces when I say it.
But didn't the doctor, have that little girl blow her nose afterwards?
Yes, just gently. You
Gently.
can,
Okay.
gently kind of, but if you take a big old
Yeah.
blowing it hard, it can pop and it hurts. So another thing is steam for inhalation. So you're real congested. I find that either putting a few drops of eucalyptus oil or just some ginger, if you have some ginger root powder, into some nice boiling or really warm water. I don't recommend this for pediatrics just because of the risk of burns. I always use care, obviously, um, but very helpful for that temporary relief of the sinuses. So prevention, we've talked a lot about what you can do for the symptoms, but how can you prevent your colds? Probiotics. Probiotics have been shown to decrease the length of symptoms if you do get a cold by 2.5 days. That's the best we have out there as far as studies. And also have been shown to reduce the incidence of colds by 12%, which again, we don't have a lot out there saying will actually cut back the number of colds you're going to get. The species that were studied were Lactobacillus plantarum and Lactobacillus paracasei in this particular study. I tend to be less of a pill taker and more of a let's do this through our diet. So, as far as the species recommendations, if you're going to be a real purist, you can look for those. I say make sure you're getting something fermented in your diet on a daily basis. It doesn't have to be huge, but making sure either yogurt or kefir, um, there's a woman on the island who makes fermented vegetables, chila, in these jars. You just need a tablespoon of that a day. You can make your own, super easy to all those extra zucchinis that I have in my garden. Come take them. You can ferment those, but making sure you're getting some ferment in your diet is, I think, the best option for probiotics. Stress management, I think this is pretty self-explanatory, but does need to be mentioned. We know that stress will reduce our immune system. They've done study after study of looking at college students and the number of increased colds and flus around exam time. So really paying attention to what your stress level is. And it's easy to say, well, just don't be stressed, but so it leads me to one of my favorite topics, which is meditation or mindfulness. We know to combat that stress, we can do some sort of mindfulness practice on a frequent basis. I try for daily, but just making sure that you have some sort of practice in your life has been shown to significantly decrease the number of flus that you'll experience in a winter season. The study I like to quote the most is they took two groups of patients. There were 60 patients in the group that got an 8-week mindfulness-based stress reduction course, similar to the one I offer starting in February. And then the other 60 patients didn't have the mindfulness course. And they did the course before the cold season came. And then they, after the end of the year, said, how many colds did you get? How many days were you sick? And the numbers to me were astounding. So the group that had the mindfulness course, in the total of 60 people, they had 27 episodes of a cold or something. So only half of them actually got sick. And of the number of days that group spent sick, it was 257 days. In the group that didn't have the mindfulness course, they had 40 colds in the group and they had 453 days, so almost double the amount of sickness in the group that didn't take the mindfulness course.
Just a curiosity
Yeah.
question. When the study was done, do you know if they asked the people whether they would prefer to do
No.
meditation? It was a blind study, so
Yep.
they had to go this way or this
Yep.
way as they were told?
Yep.
Wonderful.
And the group that didn't get the mindfulness course got something else, kind of a healthy living something, so that they weren't feeling neglected. But yeah, so pretty powerful to me to say, wow, this is what helps me in the depths of winter be like, okay, I'll get up and do my yoga practice or whatever it is that I'm going to be doing. So, and then I'd be amiss if I didn't talk a little bit about sleep, nutrition, super important. I think we all recognize that if we're run down, we're eating poorly, we're more apt to catch something. So some specific dietary suggestions, definitely reducing sugar is important. Chicken soup, there are studies out there looking at chicken soup, and they're actually showing it's not a huge benefit, but a little bit of a benefit for helping with the cold symptoms, reducing the length of the illness. increasing your fruits and vegetables, getting more of those vitamin minerals just naturally through your diet. And then sleep, making sure you're getting those 7 to 9 hours a night. Um, so what do I do with all of this gobbledygook to prevent colds? Definitely the stress management and daily mindfulness practice is just huge. I make sure I'm doing that, particularly in the winter months. If I'm getting into a high risk time of traveling, I'm going to be under a lot of stress, that's when I'll take the andrographis. My kids come home from school with the snotty noses. That's when I pull it out. I make sure I get my probiotics daily. I make a smoothie in the morning, throw some kefir in it. That's a super easy way to get it in. And then I'm neurotic. Wash your hands, wash your hands, wash your hands. I mean, that's the most common way that we're passing this stuff off. It's the door handles in particular that you have to be careful of. So,
What is kefir?
kefir is a fermented milk, and it's super easy to make. Once you get a culture, you can bring some milk, or we could just get organic milk from the store, and you put some in with the culture, and it's not as thick as yogurt, but it kind of gets that yogurty consistency and just loaded with probiotics. So, and if I do get a cold, then the first thing I reach for is my zinc, my umca, and my andrographis. So those two that nobody's heard about, they're top on my list. I decrease the amount of sugar in my diet. I decrease my exercise intensity. Really important. I think sometimes we try and power through, but you don't have to stop completely, but just really nourishing your body is the way I like to think about it. Increase my mindfulness practice to make sure I'm getting 8 hours of sleep a night. And for specific symptoms, I tend to go with the honey and lemon juice for the cough. Although elderberry doesn't have tons of evidence, I still like it for those cough symptoms, mostly because the syrup's so yummy and good. And for the sinus congestion, those neti pots and eucalyptus or ginger steam inhalation. So I kind of gave you my favorites, also the ones that have the best evidence. So that's the end of the common cold. Now we're going to move on to depression. Winter in Maine is so fun, isn't it? I'll just see. I have a few shots of winter in Maine.
Look how pretty it is.
This is at 3:50.
Just when the sun's going down.
Exactly. It's beautiful if it's summer and 9 p.m. Hmm. I don't know how you all feel after looking at these, but I'm like, I can just feel like, oh, setting in.
That one did.
That's the one. It's the car that you're gonna have to go scrape. Yeah. So, how do you know what is seasonal affective disorder? Seasonal affective disorder is basically a seasonal shift in your mood. Generally, it's depression symptoms. The symptoms that we see the most commonly are, like I said, the depression symptoms, just feeling unmotivated, feeling like you're overwhelmed when you would normally handle something, just feeling down, blah. The things you used to like to do, not really wanting to do them anymore. Anxiety is another symptom, feeling like, again, you can't handle the things you used to feel like you could handle, just anxious. We all know that feeling. Mood changes. You also can go the other way of just feeling kind of manic, kind of jittery, out of sorts. Sleep problems for sure. Most of us tend towards the oversleeping, but some people will have more insomnia that goes with this. Lethargy, I already mentioned. Overeating, I'll talk about why. Social problems, meaning just having a hard time connecting with other people, not wanting to, or just not able to. And then sexual problems, decreased libido, just not interested. And the question is why? Why does this happen? We all know it's associated with the amount of light, but what's going on biochemically in our brains to make seasonal affective disorder a thing? And it really comes down to two hormones, our melatonin and our serotonin. So most people have heard of melatonin. That's the hormone that we produce when it's dark out. And it tends to be what makes us a little bit more sleepy, tends to increase at night, helps us sleep through the night, which is great when it doesn't get dark at 3:50 in the afternoon. So don't need to state the obvious, but I will. Winter, we're not getting as much sunlight. Our melatonin stores start increasing. That's not the biggest problem. The problem is that that results in less serotonin. Light helps our body convert melatonin over to serotonin. So when we're not getting light, all that melatonin's hanging out, and not as much is getting converted over to serotonin. Serotonin's our happy hormone, our coping hormone, the hormone that makes us feel like ourselves and good. So the melatonin we've got way too much of, the serotonin we don't have enough of. So as a result, we feel sleepy and lazy, and the happy, motivated side of us just goes out the window. But why do we gain weight? What does that that decreased serotonin, increased melatonin do? The low serotonin levels actually, that in and of itself makes us crave carbohydrates because our bodies are smart. When we eat carbohydrates, we get this natural little short-term boost in our serotonin levels. So it's our body saying, my serotonin level's low. What am I going to do? There's a chocolate bar, there's cookies, let's go. So as a result, we tend to eat more carbohydrates, and then we end up with the winter weight gain. You add that on to the not feeling like you want to exercise, can't get out because it's dark. It's just where we go. And then you add on the holidays. Have you ever noticed Halloween, Thanksgiving, Christmas? I mean, as soon as the daylight shifts down, we have these incredible holidays to just boost our serotonin levels through carbohydrates. Um, so that was interesting to me as to why we gain weight. This is my baby. This is a light box, and does anybody have a light box? They're bright. I don't know how much it shows up with the projector on, but I'll come. It's This runs about $50 on Amazon, so not bad. And I like to show it. I've had this one for 8, 9 years now, and it's still going strong. But light therapy has tons of research behind it. We know that it works because we know what causes seasonal affective is simply that we're not getting enough of the sunlight. That often leads to us exercising less and gaining weight and other things that can worsen it. But the primary issue is that not getting enough light. And if we can get the light, then that melatonin not going to be increasing, and the melatonin we do have will be converted over to serotonin, so we have the serotonin stores that we need. So it's really straightforward. What you need, and 30 minutes, give or take, and I say if you can get 20, get 20. 30 minutes of light. Ideally, the light box should be around 18 inches from your face. It needs to be 10,000 lux of light. So I've had people say, well, I have those bulbs in my house, the full spectrum bulbs. I'm like, great, but that's not the 10,000 lux of light coming 18 inches from your face. It's really, you're kind of blasting yourself to get that pineal gland to start converting that melatonin to serotonin. Um, like I said, this is $50 on Amazon, and I recommend starting in September, if you're affected by this, because if you start in December, you're too far gone. And you've had the winter weight gain, you haven't exercised in months, and you're probably sick with a cold. So start in September so you don't even go there. But no, you just need, so I often will have mine on my desk. So it just needs to be kind of, ideally, they say if it can be above, but that's impossible. So on your desk, on the breakfast table, if you're somebody who eats breakfast, reads the newspaper, having it there. Morning is better than afternoon or evening, but it's more about getting the light. So if the time you're going to do it is before bed, go for it. Some people will have a hard time sleeping after that much because it's going to kick your melatonin stores down. And if you have issues with insomnia, that will make it so that you can't fall asleep. That's the only downside of doing it. Right. So, really not good. Then you're calling me. Exercise, I think we all know this, but I do need to mention it. So getting outdoors, even if it's gray, it doesn't have to be for long, long periods of time. 5, 10, ideally 15 minutes a day, getting outside. So trying to find some activity that you like outside or not, just getting out and walking.
Dr. Lamp again, does it have to
Yeah.
be 10,000 lux?
Yes. Yeah.
It wouldn't be like 5,000 lux and twice the length.
All the studies are on the 10,000 lux. So it's one of those, and you'll look, if you go on Amazon and look at, sometimes there's a cheaper one for maybe $35, but it's only 5,000 lux. I say if you're going to spend your money, get the 10,000 lux and do it that way.
there anybody think about integrating into a computer monitor?
Let's talk afterwards. We're gonna make money. You just lost billions because you gave out your idea and it's gonna be on the internet. No, it'd be brilliant, really. Yeah. So,
You think when people would get it, wouldn't realize they'd be getting it.
right. It's pretty, I mean, when it's on my desk, I can see my screen, but you would realize you're getting it. But
Even if it's on
yeah.
just the angle, it doesn't have.
Right. It's right. It's when it's been when I worked at other clinics and it's in my office, people walk in and they're like, whoa. And then they come in and they say, can I borrow it? So vitamin D, coming back to vitamin D. So, whereas not super beneficial for colds, vitamin D is important, particularly with seasonal affective disorder. I always check levels for somebody who's coming in with seasonal symptoms, make sure their level's adequate. If it's not, we're going to treat them with pharmaceutical doses of vitamin D. If it is adequate and you're having symptoms, I say it's 2,000 international units a day would be a recommended dose. Everybody should be getting at least 1,000 units a day, adults in Maine, year round. So if you, it's one of those people say, well, I get it in the summer, but we didn't ever have the sun high enough or strong enough in the sky to really boost our vitamin D stores. Supplements that can increase our serotonin. I'm only going to go into this briefly because if you go back to my depression anxiety talk, all those supplements and integrative measures are appropriate for seasonal affective disorder. But the two that are highest on my list are St. John's wort and SAM-E. Both are known to increase serotonin levels, have some really good data behind them. So they're used in not only standard depression, but in our seasonal affective disorder.
I got two questions. That makes me think because now there's a supplement that can increase serotonin. So you could take a SAM-E that would increase the serotonin, but uh, would that also drop your melatonin? I mean, do they always work together?
Mm-mm.
So your
It's really,
melatonin level could be up because it's the middle of winter and you're not sitting in front of a light box.
yeah,
Serotonin low, you could take the SAMe, but now your melatonin and serotonin are up.
yeah,
Is that a problem?
no,
Okay.
you're going to feel better. You might,
Okay. And I had a question about the light box. I can't think of it.
okay. The St. John's wort, we dose at 300 milligrams 3 times daily or 450 milligrams twice daily. And the SAMe, we usually start at 200 milligrams twice a day. I told you it's my favorite topic ever. Go ahead.
Does your light box, because of the light it's giving you, does the light box increase your vitamin D levels?
No, it doesn't. And the light box, sometimes you'll find these boxes that have a special blue spectrum. For a while, that was kind of the fad. You actually don't want that. There's potential risk to the retina or the macula with the blue spectrum. You just want a standard 10,000 lux light box. This is the cheapest one you'll find on Amazon. So if you are going to purchase one, it's called a Sun Touch Nature's. It says Sun Touch, but it's by Nature Bright. It's the if you put in the search seasonal affective light box, it's the first one or two that comes up. So mindfulness. Always coming back to mindfulness because we know it's incredibly effective for depression, also effective for seasonal affective disorder. So one of the things I found while preparing this talk was a really cool guided meditation for seasonal affective disorder. And it's one of the things we know helps is if you have seasonal affective disorder, go here. Get the sunlight you need, but most of us can't. So as a result, we have a different way of getting there. And it's 13 minutes long, but I'm just going to play 2 or 3 minutes of this guided meditation, which you can find on YouTube for free.
Welcome to Goodbye Winter Blues, a soothing tropical guided meditation brought to you by TracksToRelax.com. Because you'll be relaxing and closing your eyes while listening to this guided meditation, never listen to this session while driving or doing anything that requires your attention. Remember, you can stop this meditation at any time by simply opening your eyes and pressing the stop button on your screen. So let's begin this meditation experience by sitting or laying down in a comfortable place where you can relax without interruption for the duration of this session. And when you're nice and comfortable, you can allow your eyes to close. At some point, we've all seen a tropical beach on TV or in movies. And many of us have actually been somewhere warm in the wintertime in order to escape the cold and snow. And I'm wondering if you can think of one of those places where you have been or seen on TV or in a movie, and remember for a moment what it was like. Perhaps there were palm trees in this place that you remember, gently swaying in the warm tropical breeze and providing shade from the sun. And you can notice the color of the sand. Perhaps it was a very light-colored, powder-like sand. Or maybe it was more coarse and a little darker shade because of the crushed fragments of coral contained within it. Just imagine for a moment that you're standing on this beach
Welcome back. So anyway, using a guided meditation, sometimes to take yourself out of here. You can do that staring at your light box and get double the effect. But I find that mindfulness is such an important component of all of this.
Do you have to have your eyes open for the light box?
That's what I was just thinking when you said staring at it.
I don't know if I know that answer.
So, I
It's
have my eyes shut there.
right,
The
you're
light box
still,
is on.
you'd be, yeah.
And you can't OD on the light box, can you?
Theoretically, you can. So if you have a tendency towards mania or bipolar, in theory, but no. Yeah.
So
So,
if you happen to fall asleep, well,
oh yeah, no. But somebody's like, I'm going to do light all day, every day. Well, I'm worried about them anyway for other reasons. But so, in summary, integrative approaches to the common cold. We've talked about prevention, treatment at the onset of symptoms, what we can use, the importance of self-care, symptomatic relief, and integrative approaches to seasonal affective disorder. We talked about light therapy, exercise, mindfulness practice, and ways to boost our serotonin. So, thank you.